The space between our expectations and our reality is a fertile field. It will grow something: disappointment. When I was in high school, I had a friend whose sister had the coolest hairdo. It was cropped short with straight bangs that fell messy over one eye. She was that older sister who just seemed to have a handle on how to do everything with style. I somehow decided that all of her coolness traced back to that hairdo. Like that was the budding spot from where all of the life I wanted could sprout. Yes, it was that hairdo. Never mind the fact that her hair was thin and obedient. Mine was thick and rebellious. And never mind the fact that her hair was sleek and straight, and mine, well, it was curly at best and frizzy at worst. And never mind that her bangs fell nicely over her forehead, while mine had a crazy cowlick causing them to grow up, not down. Yeah, never mind reality. I set my expectation on the highest bar and willed my hair to fall in line. The hairdresser chopped and chopped and chopped, and tried to assure me after she was done that it looked just like the picture of the older sister. But that was a lie. I knew it and she knew it. And oh, how that space between my expectation and my new reality grew some serious disappointment. I still have nightmares sometimes of that disastrous hairdo where I wake up and I'm just desperately making sure that my hair is still there. But hair grows back. Bad cuts can be fixed in time, and that disappointment can be remedied. But other situations aren't so easy. Maybe you've had some space between a current reality and an unfulfilled expectation. If so, I imagine disappointment can be found growing right there. Psalm 23:1 says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." The Hebrew word for want is chaser, meaning to lack, be without, become empty. So if the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not become empty. I shall not live in a constant state of disappointment where circumstances absolutely leak me dry. But I do sometimes. And not just with silly things like my hair, it's other stuff as well, the important stuff in life, the hard disappointments. So how do I let the Lord shepherd me in those? What does that even mean, to have a shepherd? How do I close that gap between my expectations and my current reality and not let disappointment overwhelm me? Well, today we find ourselves in this amazing place. It's a valley between mountains, and this valley can quickly turn into a gorge of rushing water. If you notice the topography, it's pretty amazing because all of the mountains lead to a deep, deep place, and this topography is pretty typical in Israel. This was kind of like a place where a Jewish shepherd may have been. You see, when a town would be established, you would have the town and then you would have farmland with the fertile soil. But the farmers didn't want the shepherds to be in that soil because they would eat the crops and trample the land. So they would push the shepherds outside. And so this would be kind of like where the shepherds might be pushed. The Jewish shepherds would have brought their sheep to rest and to eat after the waters would rush through this gorge from a deep rain. And if you'll notice, where the greenery is actually down in the valley. If a shepherd was a good shepherd, he was kind. He always took care of his sheep. And this brings us to today's I am statement. John 10, starting in verse 7, says this, "Therefore, Jesus said again, 'Very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief only comes to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full.'" Verse 11, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." Verse 14, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. In our modern Western culture, we really have little understanding of what a shepherd is and how a sheep behaves. So let's look at another passage of Scripture to really help us unpack all of this even more. Psalm 23, written by a good shepherd named David, who would later become king. David starts, "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters." The phrase lie down in Hebrew paints a beautiful picture of one lying down after a very full meal, completely satisfied. Take a look around. Now, we are not standing in Switzerland, obviously, where maybe you've pictured this before with rolling green hills. You don't see those green, lush grasses like you see in Switzerland or maybe in Ireland like you've seen before. We're in the Judean hills, rocky and dry. But when the rain comes, just like I mentioned before, when the rain comes, it comes very, very hard, and waters would rush from the high places down on both sides, and you'll see it just forms a massive gorge. And when the rains come down, a flash flood comes very, very quickly, leaving death and destruction in its wake. While the sheep had no concept of the weather, the shepherds would. They could feel the impending storm. They could feel it in their bones. They could kind of hear it rumbling. And when the shepherd knew that the storm was coming, he wouldn't allow the sheep to be down in the gorge because they would drown. So the shepherd would patiently wait until the storm had passed before they would lead their flock down to drink. The shepherd's timing is so perfect because he wants to get us to the still waters. And then he wants us to lie down and rest where it's safe. His timing was so perfect and his provision was so good. Verse 3 goes on to say, he restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Note that it doesn't say he restores my circumstances always or the situation that I'm in, but that he will restore my soul in whatever situation I find myself in. Now, I know the heart-ripping hopelessness of having a soul that's not yet restored. I can imagine maybe you too. And it often comes from an unraveling of a relationship. The silence, the rejection, the harsh words, the absence of intimacy, the questions, the lack of answers, the deep, deep hurt. You know, the first 5 years of my marriage were really, really hard. We were two sinners coming together with loads of baggage, unrealistic expectations, and extremely strong wills. Well, my heart aches for anyone in a really tough place with their marriage. Many of us have been there, but I think the deepest hurt comes when one spouse just resigns while the other is still trying. There's a panic that arises to somehow make the other person wake up, stop that resignation, and help you fix this relationship. It feels anything but restored. So a situation like this is so much more complicated than simple answers I could offer right here. But might I give you one stepping stone upon which to stand, to stop the panic, just to brace yourself? Decide today that you are worthy, because you are worthy. You may not feel like it, but a quick glimpse at Psalm 139 assures me you are. You are fearfully and wonderfully made by a loving God who cares for you, who loves you. You are the sheep of a good shepherd who's wanting to restore your soul. And I'd rather depend on the solid truth of God than the roller coaster of fickle feelings. You are beautiful. You are captivating. You are attractive and smart and capable. But if you're in a relationship full of unmet expectations, unresolved issues, and frustrating communication, I suspect you feel a little less than all I've described. Broken down relationships can really break down a woman, I know. An unrestored soul can steal our peace And if you're anything like me, when you feel broken down and you have no peace, well, those around you get your worst. Then upon all the hurt and all the anxiety, you layer in regret, shame, and that feeling that you just kind of lost yourself. You lost that girl inside who used to be so positive and happy and ready to take on the world. Well, I want to whisper a tender truth to you. The only way to recapture her, and the only way, is to come up for air and to remember you are worthy because the Creator says you are. Honest cries for help lifted up to our Jesus, our Good Shepherd, will not go unheard. He sees, He knows, He loves, and He restores, and He will direct you as long as you stick with Him. Remember, you can't control how anyone else acts and reacts, but you can control how you act and react. You may feel alone, but you're not alone. Those other sheep around you, they may have left, but the shepherd is there, and He will restore your soul. The next part of the verse says, He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. A friend of mine who lives in Israel says the phrase paths of righteousness describes, it's really like circles of righteousness. It's like circular paths going around the mountain. If you were just to go straight up and over the mountain, that would be incredibly hard and potentially deadly. So when a good shepherd would lead their flock, he would do it around the mountain, maybe even in like a zigzag pattern that formed this picture of circles around the mountain, because that was the safest path for them to take. You know, when I drive through the mountains of North Carolina, where I'm from, rarely do I like to take paths that drive straight up the mountain because it just feels so scary to me. But the road that curves back and forth, well, it safely navigates me eventually up and over that mountain. In Jeremiah 50, verse 6, Jeremiah is speaking about the nation of Israel and about how they've become lost sheep following a bad shepherd. It says, my people have become lost sheep. Their shepherds have led them astray. They have made them turn aside on the mountains. They have gone along from mountain to hill and have forgotten their resting. The Hebrew word for paths, it means almost like well-worn paths or deep ruts that are good ruts. And these ruts were so important because the shepherd maybe had made these ruts or these paths on their own over time, but more than likely others had gone before them to create these good, safe paths. And each following generation of shepherds wisely walked in them. Even today, you can literally look at the hills in Israel and you can see the paths the shepherds have been walking for generations. I wonder, what deep ruts or paths have you created in your life of regularly walking with God? What deep positive places have you forged that now you can follow in? I encourage you to remind yourself of those paths, of those regular rhythms of your relationship with God. These paths of righteousness are good because they are in a circle. They always lead you back to God. Keep walking those paths daily, as they will lead you to Him. The verse concludes with, for His name's sake. This reminds us to elevate our perspective, to recognize that we were created for so much more than just temporary happiness, but for His name's sake, and for His sake, for eternal things and an eternal perspective. In verse 4 we read, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The shepherd knew they would pass through dark places, that there would be reasons for them to fear. But if they were with the good shepherd, he would protect them and comfort them. Shadows were merely the lack of light and cannot stop you. You can always walk through a shadow. The shadow of a bear can indicate that a bear is close, but the shadow itself can't hurt you. A tree can fall on you and you would surely be injured, but if the shadow falls on you, there would be no harm done. The presence of a shadow is evidence of the presence of light. You just have to walk through the shadow, through the valley, toward the light, for the light will be on the other side. And remember what you already learned about Jesus being the light of the world. Jesus is our good shepherd, and he is the light. The closer we are to him, the closer we are to the light. You don't need to fear the shadows. The rod and the staff of the shepherd had many uses. It would guide the flock. It would protect them against predators. And when they walked on steepy rock places, it helped stabilize them. And the shepherd used it to check the depth of water before the sheep would step in. He would also use it to check to make sure that the bottom, if it was too muddy, he wouldn't allow the sheep to get in because then they would get stuck. So it really helped them navigate all different terrains, and it really also helped them navigate at night. The only time that the staff or the rod was used as a weapon was against predators. Whoever had the staff or the rod in his hand, they had the authority. The Jewish people that Jesus was sharing with in John 10, they knew all about a shepherd. They knew that when Jesus said, "I am the good shepherd," that all of these traits came with that good shepherd. Psalm 23 concludes, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." The good shepherd has good plans for his sheep, and those plans are eternal, but you have to let the shepherd shepherd you. You have to let him lead you. You have to trust him, and you have to take the role of a sheep, not the shepherd yourself. It can be so hard to let yourself be the sheep and to let him truly be a shepherd because we want control. We want answers now, and we do not want to go to the hard, scary places. But remember, it's in the valleys where we find the water, that beautiful, beautiful water. It's in the valleys that we find the vegetation, and the shepherd knows that. In those times where you're tempted to resist, when your soul isn't at rest, and you feel far from green pastures and far from rest, remember, he's there, the good shepherd. The good shepherd can be trusted, and he does have good in store for you.